Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the Retail Corner. I am Cole Koumalats, and I'm joined today by Kacey Bengtson. She is Retail Director and Visual Merchandiser over at Cheekwood. Thank you very much for being part of the Retail Corner.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
So, for those of us who aren't part of your LinkedIn and everything else like that, can you give us kind of walk us through your CV a little bit? Because I know visual merchandising is a huge part of your history and your current position as well.
Yes. Yeah. So I started in retail when I was 17. I became an assistant manager and I worked as an assistant manager and store manager throughout college in different mall stores. And then in 2014, I moved to Nashville and really got involved in more tourism retail. I started at the Hermitage Hotel, which was Nashville's only five-star hotel, managing their boutique. And since then, I have been at multiple kind of Nashville staples. I've been at the Country Music Hall of Fame as the Hat Show print manager. And now I'm at Cheekwood, which is a botanical garden, art museum, and historic home here in Nashville as well. And then throughout that time, I've also moved away a couple times and worked at other places. I worked at Magnolia in Waco, Texas as a visual merchandiser, which is also a major tourist draw for people.
No kidding, yeah.
People who love Chip and Joanna. Definitely draws a lot of tourism there. And then I also dabbled in television, set deck, and wardrobe styling, which was my little venture outside of retail, but still very much in the visual realm. So
right.
Always been doing kind of visual design and artistic things within my retail roles. But I've been at Cheekwood now for 4 years as the retail director, and I have 2 to 3 stores depending on the time of the year.
Well, I can tell that you named at least three different places that I count as places I love, and so like the Chip and Joanna's place in Waco and the Hatch Print Show, our Hatch Show Print is a lot of that actually decorates my walls in my house. And so, I can't thank you enough. So, as a visual person, you went to school for arts, and you were very, that side of the brain and such. When applying that to retail, like, what do you think is the most significant challenge that we're facing right now? Like within the visual aspect of retail.
I think right now in visual merchandising, we see so many stores and so many more boutiques on social media than before, right? Before you're just viewing what's local and maybe your competition shopping and, as a buyer or merchandiser or someone in the retail district, maybe you're visiting other stores frequently, but now everyone has access to everything, right? We can see boutiques across the country. I can look at other museums and garden shops super easily. And I think that unfortunately that creates like a lot of trend where people are trying to match other people. And so many times when I go shopping, because I go shopping everywhere, if I go on vacation, I will find the shopping district and go in every single little boutique, and they all look the same right now. They're so focused on being trendy and having the trendy product and appealing to maybe Gen Z or whatever market you're appealing to. I think the constant seeing what other people are doing and trying to match it. I feel like when I shop today in a lot of stores that I'm seeing the same product over and over. I'm seeing the same aesthetic over and over. And people are kind of losing their individuality and instead really focused on what's going to make me look like everyone else.
Kind of a loss of individuality. That's sad to hear a little bit. So as a VM trainer, you're kind of pulling in all these different aspects, and you're bringing new visual merchandisers. You're being a mentor to these people. And how do you encourage that individuality? How are you kind of shaping those people that you bring in and you train?
Yeah, when I talk to other museum store managers or my staff who I'm trying to train on visual merchandising, I really stress the fact that, especially in the last few places that I've worked, especially Cheekwood, we have so many different types of guests, right? We're not maybe a fashion boutique on the corner that is aiming towards one type of person or one size or one, age bracket. we have families, we have, males, females, all age ranges. So when they're merchandising or when I'm buying, we're really trying to appeal to the largest group of people that we can. So buying product and styling it in a way on one side of the store and maybe styling it totally different on the other side of the store. I arrange my store kind of by collection instead of by category. So I have like a
Okay.
pastel wall. I have this really like bright, fun, kind of whimsical wall. And then I have this, kind of darker, edgier aesthetic as well. And sometimes the same product is displayed in all three areas and can appeal to different people based on the product that it's grouped with or the way that we've styled it. So just really
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
focusing on like what's trendy or who am I trying to attract, but how am I going to sell this product to multiple people and how is it going to appeal and inspire people to put it in their home with products that they like.
Sure, because at the end of the day, it's about the success of the overall store, right? It's not, "Oh, man, my section of the store is doing great," or, "This section of the store is doing great."
Right.
It's you have to look at it holistically, and so bringing in that kind of experience, that kind of, uh, boutique feel, even though it's the same product in different parts of the store, it makes it almost personal, which I think is kinda cool.
Yeah.
So speaking of like personal shopping and everything else like that, we've all moved to e-commerce basically, and so with the rise of e-commerce, where do you see like brick and mortars really fitting in? Because I've talked to some people that say, you know what, the brick and mortar, it's coming back. It's a thing that people want to do. They like to put their hands on the products, especially
Yeah.
personal experiences like places you've been involved with. What do you think about that? How does it all fit together?
Yeah. So, I mean, in within museums and botanical gardens, and we do have an advantage of people are there and they're here for an experience. Maybe they're visiting family, and so they want something to kind of remember it by. So I think in museum retail specifically, you do have a bit of an advantage over, boutiques or freestanding stores where they are competing so much with e-com. Museum stores and tourism retail is really about experiential retail, right? You want
Right.
to come into the gift shop and have an experience and really get the best customer service. Come in because you have a really great display or you have a rotating, something that's going to draw them into the gift shop initially. And then the services you provide and the environment that you create is what's going to close that sale and get them to buy, and they're not going to visit again. Where if you're in a boutique or somewhere else where you don't have that initial draw on, how are you going to get people in the doors? It's still the same thing. It's the product that you supply maybe won't bring them in the doors because they can search it on Amazon or they can find it elsewhere.
Yeah.
So what's getting them in the door is again the experience and the services and being memorable. So when they have family in town or when they're hanging out with friends, knowing, hey, we want to go to this store. I want to show you this place because it's such a great experience. Their merchandising
Yeah.
is so great. The woman who works there, you know her story. So it's connecting with customers and creating the demand to come in and talk to the person and be able to upsell. So that's what everyone says is it's just about customer service, but it's also about visual merchandising and display
Absolutely.
and the environment and so many other things that draw people in visually to a store instead of, because I'm not an online shopper. I don't love it. I only do it when I can't find something. I prefer to
Yeah.
go in and, see how things are styled together and see how things are grouped together and buy multiple items instead of just clicking through pages of product photography that's not interesting.
Yeah. It may have one sleeve longer than the other or whatever, when it comes to online shopping. And so you were talking about pulling in different aspects of product and everything else like that. And as a buyer, what do you really consider when you're selecting product in stock? Like, how do you ensure the balance?
Yeah, so I definitely look for smaller brands. In my spare time, I go to all the
What is that? Who has
I
spare
know.
time? Yeah.
Well, some of it's on the clock and some of it
Fair
is
enough. Fair
truly
enough.
spare time, but that's so important, is going to local vendor markets, art festivals, really anything, or just looking on Instagram, looking on Etsy, looking on Fair for just smaller brands that you don't see everywhere else. I talk a lot, when I'm training people on buying, about not purchasing product that's oversaturated in your market. So Nashville's a great example of, you go in every store and they have a TriStar magnet. You go in every store and they have
Oh yeah.
cowboy hats. Every store has certain brands that I won't name, but they're local Nashville brands, but they're in every single brick and mortar that you walk into because they're a Nashville brand. And some people will ask
Sure.
me, "Oh, why don't you carry them?" I'm like, "Because you can throw a rock and find them anywhere else." Like, I want to carry the smaller brands who are from, Knoxville, from Georgia, from other, you know, local-ish
Right.
areas, but that you don't see everywhere. And it's so important, I think, to know your brands and know the story behind them. And it's smaller brands have better stories, right? So when you're
Oh
telling
yeah.
people this is handmade out of Portland, Oregon, it's by a husband and wife, like, you really know the story of the brand. That's what's going to help sell the product. So when I'm buying, yes, I have some bigger brands that are recognizable, but if I start seeing them in a lot of places in Nashville, I'll pull them out. And I feel like I don't need to compete with every other store around here. I'd rather tell the story of smaller brands and earn up or build up their story and build up their sales. And
Well,
that's
it goes back to that individuality. It goes back to that, that piece that we were just talking about at the very beginning, where it's, if you're coming to some place, and especially if you're having an experience that is very personal to you, you want that reflected in something that you're going to purchase. You don't want to, scarves from the MoMA are neat, but they're dime a dozen, and so that makes sense. And so when you were talking, yeah, you mentioned sustainability as well. Like,
Mhm.
what are you doing to, like, kind of increase the sustainability of, like, the tourism market and that kind of thing? What kind of eco-friendly practices are you going after?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing is obviously trying to buy more sustainable product and stuff, product that promotes sustainability or recycled goods or fair trade, anything like that, and really calling it out, like having signage or stickers on that product that says, made in the US, fair trade product, made of recycled whatever. We have
Yeah, recycled anything these days.
Yeah. At the garden shop, we've got, cards where the envelopes are like plantable and they've got seeds in them. So anything like that, people love to hear it. And I think celebrating it and calling it out and pointing it out to your customers is your first step in kind of showing them that you're paying attention to what you're buying, and buying, like I
Yeah.
said, those local vendors, um, and sharing those stories with your customers, I think, is important. Like, oh, we have a local vendor, he drops off his goods. There's a sustainable practice right there. You're saving on shipping and stuff like that. And then other sustainable practices, I feel like store managers are afraid of because they're more expensive, right? They're always viewed as like, oh,
Sure.
I can be sustainable, but it's going to cost me more. But you have to look at the other positives of that. So, say you cut off receipts, you're not doing paper receipts anymore. Look at it as a positive because you're now getting people's email addresses. If you're going to offer
Sure.
a reusable
Yeah.
bag instead of plastic bags, you now have free marketing because people are walking around with your reusable bags. If you're recycling
And
boxes for e-com, like, just look at the positive impact that it has, and it'll probably balance out somehow.
yeah, and more people, thankfully, are starting to pay attention to that. And
Mhm. For sure.
it's not necessarily the lowest common denominator anymore. It's the feeling that comes along with a purchase as well. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of good. So I kind of want to ask a, not necessarily personal question, but a personal question for my career, at least. I've been in loss prevention for years and years, and logistics for years, and I've always had a great relationship with my eventual merchandisers, because everybody calls loss prevention sales prevention, but really, if you work with visual merchandisers, you can accomplish both, and
Yeah.
it's kind of neat when that happens. And and so what kind of partnerships would you encourage other companies to to use to take advantage of when it comes to visual merchandising and other departments?
I think when it comes to, yeah, working with loss prevention is definitely part of the visual merchandiser's job. They're
Sure.
not, if they make a decision where they're going to put all the smaller items on the front table, that's obviously a red flag to the loss prevention analyst. Um,
Yeah,
so,
so have me pulling my hair out here. Yeah.
yeah. So, again, it's more just communicating like why you're doing what you're doing. And again, looking at the positives of it. So moving all the small items to a slat wall in the line area is going to be a better sales decision because you've got those impulse items. So
Sure.
um, looking at it from a loss prevention standpoint, but also a sales standpoint. And I talk about loss prevention a lot in like walls and shelving and putting smaller items in your target zone, which is really like from your chin to your hips, like where people naturally would reach out and touch small
Yeah.
items. That's where all your items should be that you have to, look at, examine, pick up. And smaller items shouldn't be, towards the ground where people are bending down and they're below your line of sight and you can't see what they're doing. So not only is that a good loss prevention practice, but it's also just accessibility and creating customer interaction with your product is by placing it in the right area. So a lot of loss prevention practices have sales, benefits to them.
Sure. Absolutely. Okay. And so I say we're running up against our time limit here just a little bit, but I got one question for you. If you had to go back in time and talk to yourself as you're starting your career, as you're studying art, as you're working in retail a little bit, what kind
Mhm.
of advice would you give yourself? What kind of advice would you give a person just starting out that wants to be a visual merchandiser, that wants to use that artistic side of their brain in retail?
Yeah. I mean, I think I did definitely do the advice I'm about to say, but it is
That's good.
take all the jobs, take all the um, unknown experiences, because if you really do want to be a buyer and a merchandiser and you want to be marketable to, obviously I've worked in mall stores, I've worked in fancy museums, I've worked at, you know, just really different places. I was a manager
Some pretty cool places.
for 3 years. And then I went to a five-star hotel where I had to wear a suit every day. I was a manager of Claire's where I was selling $3.99 earrings. And then I was selling $5,000 sculptures at Cheekwood. So having that
Different.
experience in different categories and different, um, I guess, locations, different markets is going to be so important because you can merchandise anything, you can buy anything. You've had your target customer be everyone from teenagers to, you know, older, richer people to little kids. So everyone who walks in your door, especially in tourism retail, you've had that person as your target market. You've worked at a place where you understand them and you know what they're looking for, why they're buying what they're buying, when they buy it, who they're buying from, and you understand that kind of consumer data on a broader scale if you go outside your comfort zone and you work at places that you're like, well, I'm working at a garden. I'm not a gardener. I am an
Right.
indoor person. I'm not an outdoor person. Yet I work at a 60-acre botanical garden. So, not just sticking to what you know or who you are, or who you fit into as a target audience, but um, like I said, just taking all the opportunities you can and learning about as many categories and clientels that you can.
That makes sense. There's no bad opportunity, I guess. That makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah,
Okay,
and
cool. Well,
if you don't know your target market or your product, then you learn as you go, and it's going to be great experience in the long run.
that sounds perfect. Kacey, I can't thank you enough for joining us on the old retail corner here, and we'll have all of your information below. If anybody needs to reach out to you to
Perfect.
learn a little bit more about the visual merchandising world, and yeah, I just can't thank you enough.
Well, thank you for having me. I love talking all things visual, so this was fun.
Absolutely. We'll have you back in a little while to see what's changed in the world.
All right, sounds good.
Thanks, everybody. I'll see you next time on the retail corner.
Bye.
If you would like to be featured on our podcast, please email us at podcast@retailcorner.live or visit our website, retailcorner.live. Looking forward to having you as our guest on our podcast, and thank you so much for listening.